able to right now. That was cool. I can't believe I did that. What the heck? I'm not able to right now. That was cool.
They called him the King of the Underworld, a man who moved millions of dollars with a single phone call, a man who broke governments and silenced witnesses without blinking. But on a rainy Tuesday night, bleeding out in a muddy alley behind a dumpster, Reese Russo wasn't a king. He was just a man trying to fix a jammed gun with shaking hands, terrified of dying alone. He thought it was the end. He didn't know that the only person who could save him wasn't a doctor or a soldier or a priest. It was the homeless girl he'd walked past 1,000 times, the one everyone ignored. And she wasn't going to just save his life. She was going to teach him the one thing power couldn't buy. This is the story of how the invisible girl fixed the broken monster. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Tessa pulled the collar of her oversized military surplus jacket tighter around her neck. It was a genuine M65 field jacket, dating back to the late 80s, bought for $4 at a Salvation Army bin 3 years ago. It smelled of wet wool and diesel fumes, a scent that had become her second skin. She sat huddled under the concrete awning of the old, mesmerizing structure of the Seattle Public Library, specifically near the loading docks, where the security guards were less likely to chase her off before midnight. In her lap sat a shattered iPhone 11. The screen was a spider web of glass, the battery casing swollen. Most people saw garbage. Tessa saw a puzzle. With a precision screwdriver kit she'd found no salvaged from a Radio Shack dumpster 2 years ago, she carefully lifted the logic board. Her fingers were stained with grease and cheap bodega coffee, but they didn't shake. Never shook. "Connector pin is bent," she whispered to no one. "Amateurs." At 24, Tessa was invisible. She wasn't the addict screaming at telephone poles, nor was she the sad case with a cardboard sign asking for kindness. She was a ghost. She slept in the maintenance crawl space of a parking garage on Union Street because she knew how to pick the heavy-duty master lock meant to keep people out. She ate well enough because she fixed the faltering, stunning gun of the night manager at the Pike Place Bakery, and he paid her in day-old sourdough. She fixed things: toasters, radios, watches, engines. It was the only way she could make sense of a world that had broken her so efficiently. A screech of tires tore through the ambient noise of the rain. It wasn't the usual taxi screech. This was the guttural roar of a high-performance engine being pushed past its limit, followed by the sickening crunch of metal hitting masonry. Tessa didn't flinch, but she looked up. The sound had come from the alley connecting 4th and Madison, a dead zone. No cameras, no lights. Most street smarts dictated you run the other way. Curiosity killed the cat, but on the streets, indifference killed you faster. If it was a cop, she had to move her sleeping spot. If it was a gang, she had to hide. She packed her tools into her waterproof roll-top bag in under 10 seconds and moved. She walked with the silent, rolling gait of someone used to avoiding attention, sticking to the shadows. The alley was dark, illuminated only by the flickering red hazard lights of a car that looked like it cost more than the entire block. It was a matte black Mercedes, AMGGT, its front end crumpled like tin foil against the brick wall of an abandoned textile factory. Steam hissed violently from the radiator. Tessa stopped 20 feet away, crouching behind a dumpster filled with wet cardboard. The driver's door groaned open. A man fell out. He didn't step out. He spilled out, landing hard on the wet asphalt. He was dressed in a suit that shimmered even in the dark Italian cut likely bespoke. But the white dress shirt underneath was soaked in a dark, spreading stain just above his hip. He groaned a low, animalistic sound and dragged himself toward the rear of the car. He wasn't trying to run. He was trying to get to the trunk. Tessa watched, holding her breath. The man, groaning through gritted teeth, managed to pop the trunk. He reached inside and pulled out a heavy, black Pelican case. He fumbled with the latches, his hands slick with blood and rain. He got it open, revealing a disassembled sniper rifle and a Sig Sauer P320 handgun. He grabbed the handgun. He tried to rack the slide. Click. Jam. He cursed a harsh bark of frustration. He tried again, his fingers slipping. He was losing too much blood. His motor skills were failing. He slammed the gun against the pavement in a fit of rage, then tried to force the slide back again, screaming in pure, impotent fury. "You're going to shear the extractor pin if you keep doing that," Tessa said. The man whipped his head around, raising the jammed gun toward the shadows. His face was pale, his eyes as wild and dark, framed by wet strands of black hair. He was handsome in a terrifying, sharp-edged way, like a wolf caught in a trap. "Who's there?" he snarled. "I'll kill you." Tessa stepped out from behind the dumpster. She held her hands up, palms open, showing she was unarmed. She looked small in her oversized jacket, her brown hair tucked into a beanie. "You have a double feed," she said, calmly, ignoring the weapon pointed at her chest. "And you're bleeding out from what looks like a through and through to the lower abdomen. If you keep straining your core to rack that slide, you'll pass out in 2 minutes. Then whoever you're running from will find you." The man blinked, his vision clearly swimming. Get away." "I can fix it," she said. He laughed, a wet, hacking sound. "You're a junkie. Get lost." "I'm not a junkie, and you're holding a Sig P320. The recoil spring guide rod can get misaligned if you drop it. Give it to me. Touch this gun and you die. Die now or die in 5 minutes when the people who crashed your car catch up." Tessa took a step closer. "I heard 2 other cars screeching 3 blocks back. You don't have much time." The man's arm wavered. He tried to stand and collapsed again, the gun clattering onto the wet pavement just out of his reach. He gasped, clutching his side. Fuck! Tessa didn't hesitate. She swooped in, but not for him. She grabbed the gun. "Hey!" he shouted weakly. She ignored him. With practiced movements, she dropped the magazine, locked the slide back and dug her thumb into the ejection port, dislodging the 2 bullets wedged together. She inspected the feed ramp. Dirty. She wiped it on the inside of her jacket, snapped the magazine back in, racked the slide smoothly and engaged the safety. She walked over to him and placed the gun in his hand. "Fixed," she said. "Now about that car. It's totaled. You need to move." The man stared at the gun, then up at her. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by shock. He looked at her not as a homeless girl, but as an anomaly, a glitch in his reality. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Nobody," Tessa said. She looked at his wound. "Do you have a phone I can call 911? "No police." He grabbed her wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong, hot and feverish. "No hospitals. They'll finish the job." Tessa looked at his hand on her wrist, then at his desperate eyes. This was trouble. This was the kind of trouble that got people like her buried in landfills. But she looked at the blood. It was so much blood. "I have a med kit," she lied. It was a sewing kit and a bottle of isopropyl alcohol she used for cleaning circuit boards. And I know a place nearby that's dry. He tried to stand, leaning heavily on her. He was heavy a wall of muscle and expensive fabric. Why help? Tessa draped his arm over her shoulder, bracing herself under his weight. She smelled the gunpowder, the metallic tang of blood, and beneath it a hint of Santal 33 cologne. Because, she grunted, dragging him toward the darker recesses of the alley. I hate seeing things broken. Reese Russo had woken up in silk sheets in penthouse suites and once in a holding cell in Monaco. He had never woken up in a cage surrounded by chain-link fencing and the smell of car exhaust. He groaned, the pain in his side flaring up like a hot poker. He tried to sit up, but a hand pushed him gently back down. Don't move. You'll tear the stitches. Stitches. Reese forced his eyes open. He was lying on a makeshift bed of wooden pallets, covered with several thick wool blankets. Above him a singular battery-powered LED lantern cast a harsh white glow. He was in a cage, a storage cage specifically. Through the wire mesh he could see rows of concrete pillars and parked cars. A parking garage. He looked down at himself. His shirt was open. A stark white bandage, made from what looked like tearing up a clean t-shirt, was wrapped tightly around his waist. He could feel the stinging tightness of the skin underneath. You passed out halfway here, the voice said. He turned his head. The girl, the ghost from the alley. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, a few feet away, illuminated by the lantern. She was tinkering with something small and metallic, a watch. Where am I? Reese rasped. His throat felt like he'd swallowed glass. Maintenance storage level B4, Union Street garage, she said without looking up. Nobody comes down here. The elevator has been broken for 6 months. I disabled the stairwell camera loop last week. Reese processed this slowly. You stitched me up, with dental floss and a sterilized needle, she said. She finally looked up. Her eyes were a startlingly clear hazel, intelligent and guarded. I used vodka to clean the wound. You were lucky. It missed the gut. Just tore through the oblique muscle. Hurts like hell, but you won't die unless it gets infected. I gave you some amoxicillin. You carry antibiotics. Fish antibiotics. From the pet store. Same chemical composition as human stuff. Amoxicillin 500 milligrams. Reese let his head fall back against the bundled-up jacket, serving as his pillow. This was insanity. He was the head of the Russo crime family. He controlled the shipping lanes from Vancouver to San Diego, and he was currently being nursed back to health by a girl who lived in a parking garage and ate fish medicine. My name is Reese, he said. I know, she replied. She held up a black leather wallet. I checked your ID. Reese Russo. Address in Medina. Nice area. Bill Gates lives there. Reese's hand went instinctively to his hip. My gun, in your jacket pocket, right beside you. He felt the weight of the Sig Sauer. She hadn't taken it. She hadn't taken his money either. The wallet was sitting on a crate next to the lantern. You could have robbed me, Reese said, studying her. There's $2,000 cash in that wallet, and a black Amex. I took $40, she admitted calmly. I needed to buy the vodka, the bandages, and some water. I put the change back. Reese stared at her. In his world, loyalty was bought with blood or millions. Nobody left $2,000 on the table. Nobody. What's your name? Tessa. Tessa, you saved my life. I fixed a problem, she corrected. She put the watch down. The problem was you dying on the sidewalk and bringing heat to my sector. Now the problem is solved. You're alive. You can call your people. I can't, Reese said darkly. The memory of the ambush flooded back. It wasn't a rival gang. It was a setup. The intel about the meeting spot had been internal. Only 3 people knew where he was going to be: his brother, his consigliere, and his head of security, George. Why not? Because the people who tried to kill me are the ones who answer my phone. Tessa stared at him for a long moment. She seemed to be calculating the risk. So you're stuck? I need a phone, not mine. A burner. Untraceable. Tessa sighed. She reached into her bag and pulled out the shattered iPhone 11 she had been working on earlier. This is a brick, Reese said. Give me 10 minutes, she said. She pulled out a small soldering iron that was hooked up to a portable power bank. The logic board was fried, but I bypassed the power management chip. It won't hold a charge for long, and the screen is garbage, but it makes calls. Reese watched her work. She was mesmerizing. Her focus was absolute. There was no wasted movement. She handled the delicate electronics with the same casual confidence she had used to clear the jam in his gun. Where did you learn to do that? He asked. YouTube, she said. And trial and error. Mostly error. You're too smart to be living in a cage, Tessa. She didn't look up, but her jaw tightened. And you're too rich to be bleeding in one. Things break, Reese. People break. Sometimes you can't put them back together the way they were. She snapped the phone casing shut and pressed the power button. The Apple logo flickered to life, dim and cracked but functional. She tossed it to him. One call, she said. Then you have to go. I can't have the Mafia, or whoever you are, blowing up my home. Reese caught the phone. He looked at the cracked screen, then at the girl who had saved him. He dialed a number from memory. Not a business associate. Not family. He dialed the number of an old safe house in West Seattle, a line that only rang on a dusty landline in a basement. It was a test. If George had compromised everything, he would be monitoring the main lines. The line rang and rang, then a click. Yeah. A gruff voice. Victor Hoare, his father's old driver. Retired, loyal to the bone. It's me, Reese said. I'm alive. Dom. Victor's voice cracked. Jesus. The news. They said your car was found. Blood everywhere. George said you were dead. He's calling a sit-down for tomorrow night. He's taking the chair. George, Reese hissed. He knew it. Listen to me, Victor. I need a car, and I need a weapon, not the registry stuff. I need the stash from the old warehouse on Marginal Way. I can get it. Where are you? Reese looked at Tessa. She was watching him, hugging her knees. If he told Victor to come here, he exposed her. If George was tracking Victor. I'll come to you, Reese said. Meet me at the scrapyard in Georgetown in 2 hours. He hung up. He looked at Tessa. I need to leave. Good, she said. He tried to stand up. The pain was blinding. He stumbled, catching himself on the wire mesh of the cage. He was sweating profusely. You can't walk, Tessa said flatly. You'll tear the stitches open in a block. I have to. You're an idiot. She stood up. She walked over to a corner of the cage where a dirty tarp covered a shape. She pulled it back. It was an electric scooter, a bird rental scooter, but painted matte grey. I hacked the GPS module and swapped the battery for a high-capacity drill battery, she said. It does 40 miles per hour. It doesn't require an app. Reese stared at the scooter, then at the menacing, suited Mafia Don he was supposed to be. You want me to ride a scooter? It beats crawling, she said. I'll drive. You stand on the back and hold on. Reese laughed. It hurt, but he couldn't help it. "You're driving me. You'll crash in 10 feet, she said. She grabbed a helmet, a skateboard helmet covered in stickers. "Put this on." "No. Put it on or you walk." Reese Russo, the man who terrified senators, put on the skateboard helmet. "One condition," Reese said, as he stepped onto the scooter deck, wrapping his arms around Tessa's waist. She was tiny, frail almost, but her core felt rigid, tense. "What? You're not just dropping me off. You're staying with me until I'm safe." "Why would I do that?" "Because George. The man who did this to me. He's a perfectionist. If he finds out I survived, he'll backtrack every step I took. He'll find the alley. He'll find the blood trail. He'll find this garage. And he'll find you." Tessa went still. She gripped the handlebars. She knew he was right. She had involved herself in a shark tank. "If I come with you," she said softly, "you owe me. Name your price." "I don't want money," she said, kicking the stand up. The electric motor whirred to life with a modified, aggressive hum. "I want a job." Reese smirked against the back of her wet jacket. "Drive Tessa, and we'll see if you survive the interview." The ride to Georgetown was a blur of rain adrenaline and agonizing pain for Reese. Tessa navigated the slick Seattle streets with a terrifying kind of competence, weaving the hacked bird scooter through alleyways and cutting across vacant lots to avoid main arterials. She knew the city's circulatory system better than any cab driver, not the streets everyone used, but the veins and capillaries hidden beneath the surface. They arrived at the rendezvous point 20 minutes later. Seattle Iron and Metals Corporation, a sprawling industrial wasteland on Marginal Way. Mountains of crushed cars loomed like rusted prehistoric beasts in the dark. The air tasted of oxidized metal and seawater from the nearby Duwamish waterway. "Kill the motor," Reese whispered, his hand tightening around the Sig Sauer in his pocket. Tessa coasted the scooter behind a stack of shipping containers. "Your friend is late." "Victor isn't late. He's cautious." Reese scanned the area. A lone floodlight near the main crusher cast long, shifting shadows. He saw a car parked near the compactor office, a nondescript grey Ford Taurus. Victor's car. "Stay here," Reese commanded, sliding off the scooter with a suppressed groan. The makeshift stitching held, but the area around the wound was throbbing with a deep, hot ache. "If you get shot again, I'm not patching you up," Tessa muttered, shrinking back into the shadows of the containers. Reese limped toward the Taurus, keeping low using the piles of scrap for cover. He was 50 feet away when he realized something was wrong. The Taurus engine was off, but the driver's side door was slightly ajar. "Victor!" he called out softly. A figure stepped out from behind the crusher office. It wasn't Victor. It was a man in a heavy rain slicker, holding a Remington 8.70 shotgun. "George sends his regards, Dom," the man said, racking the shotgun slide. The sound echoed like a cannon shot in the metal canyon. Ambush. Victor was either dead or turned. Reese dove behind a rusting sedan carcass just as the shotgun roared. Buckshot sprayed the metal above his head, sparking angrily. He returned fire blindly, 2 quick shots over the hood, and heard the man curse. "He's behind the Buick, flank him!" the gunman yelled. More footsteps, at least 3 others. They had been waiting in the dark. Reese was pinned wounded, with limited ammunition. He was dead. Suddenly, the massive electromagnetic crane towering over the center of the yard shuddered to life. The floodlights mounted on its arm swung wildly, blinding the advancing gunman. The crane's massive magnet began to descend rapidly. swinging like a pendulum, directly toward the man with the shotgun. He looked up, paralyzed by the sudden mechanical screeching above him, just as the multi-ton magnet slammed into the ground, feet from him. The impact knocked him off his feet, sending the shotgun skittering away. "What the hell is wrong with the crane operator?" one of the other gunmen shouted, scrambling for cover. Reese looked back toward the shipping containers. He couldn't see Tessa, but he saw the faint blue glow of the cracked iPhone screen in the darkness. She was hacking the yard's industrial control system. The job interview. Reese muttered, a grim smile touching his lips. "Impress me, Tessa." The crane groaned again. This time the magnet energized. With a deep, thrumming sound, it lifted the rusted sedan Reese was hiding behind a good 3 feet off the ground before dropping it with a ground-shaking crash. It was a distraction, a violent, noisy distraction. "Move!" Reese yelled to himself, sprinting or stumbling rapidly toward the crusher office while the gunmen were disoriented by the rogue machinery. He rounded the corner and nearly tripped over a body. Victor. The old man was crumpled on the ground, unconscious, a nasty gash on his forehead, but breathing. His hands were zip-tied. Reese sliced the ties with a pocket knife from Victor's belt. He slapped Victor's cheeks hard. "Wake up, old man. We're leaving." Victor sputtered awake, eyes wide. "Dom." It was a setup. They were waiting. "I know. Can you drive?" Yeah, I think so." "Get the car." Reese provided covering fire, pinning down the 2 remaining gunmen who were taking pot shots from behind a pile of washing machines. The crane above them continued its chaotic dance, swinging the energized magnet dangerously close to the metal piles, making the very air hum with magnetic force. Victor roared up in the Taurus. Reese dove into the passenger seat. "Go the back entrance onto First Avenue," Reese shouted. As Victor floored the accelerator tires spinning on the wet gravel, Reese looked in the rear-view mirror. He saw a small figure sprint from the shipping containers and leap onto the back of the scooter. "Wait!" Reese yelled, grabbing Victor's arm. "Stop the car!" "Are you insane, boss? They're shooting at us! Stop the damn car!" Victor slammed on the brakes. Reese threw open his door, ignoring the agony in his side. "Tessa, ditch the scooter, get in." She didn't argue. She abandoned the scooter and sprinted toward the car, diving into the back seat just as a bullet shattered the rear taillight. Victor peeled out, smashing through a chain-link gate and onto the slick asphalt of First Avenue South, leaving the chaos of the scrapyard behind them. Silence reigned in the car for a full minute, save for their heavy breathing and the rhythmic slap of windshield wipers. Reese turned in his seat to look at Tessa. She was soaked, shivering slightly, her face smeared with grease, clutching her roll-top bag like a life preserver. "The crane," Reese said. "That was you." She nodded, not meeting his eyes. Their systems were ancient, default admin passwords on the Wi-Fi routers in the foreman's office. I bridged the connection with the phone. Reese looked at Victor, who was staring at the girl in the rearview mirror with a mixture of confusion and fear. "Victor," Reese said calmly. "Meet Tessa. She's our new CTO." "CTO?" Victor grunted. "Boss, she looks like she lives under the freeway." "She did," Reese said. "Now she works for me." The safe house was a subterranean bunker underneath a defunct dry cleaning business in Pioneer Square. It smelled of stale chemicals and old dust. It had no windows, reinforced steel doors, and a copper mesh lining in the walls to block electronic signals, a Faraday cage built by Reese's paranoid father in the 90s. For the first time in 6 hours, Reese felt relatively safe. Victor, a burly Russian whose loyalty was as solid as his sloping forehead, had gone into mother-hen mode. He'd re-cleaned Reese's wound, applying proper medical-grade adhesive sutures and wrapping it with professional gauze. He'd also produced a bottle of Macallan 25 and 2 glasses. Tessa sat on a dusty leather couch in the corner. She had showered a 20-minute ordeal that she emerged from looking almost unrecognizable. Scrubbed clean of the street grime, her hair wet and dark, she looked younger than 24. Vulnerable. But the eyes remained the same, watchful, assessing unafraid. She was wearing one of Reese's spare black cashmere sweaters that hung on her frame like a dress and a pair of oversized sweatpants. "George didn't just try to kill me," Reese said, swirling the scotch in his glass. He was sitting at a heavy oak table, his shirt off the fresh bandages, stark white against his tanned skin. "He tried to erase me. He had men at the meet point. He knew I'd call Victor, which means he owns my communications network. He's been planning this for months, Dom," Victor said miserably, pacing the concrete floor. "George was always ambitious, but to turn against family. He isn't family," Reese said coldly. "He's an employee who forgot his place, and now I have to remind him." He looked at Tessa. "You said you wanted a job. This is day 1. Tessa set her mug of instant coffee down. "What do you need?" "I need eyes. George thinks I'm dead or running scared. Tomorrow morning he's going to call a meeting of the capos to consolidate power. He'll do it at his club in Belltown, the Apex." "You want me to hack a nightclub?" Tessa asked. "I want you to hack George. I need to know who is backing him. He wouldn't make a move like this without insurance from outside triads. Maybe the cartel. I need to know where the money is coming from and where he's vulnerable." Tessa stood up and walked over to the table. She looked at the expensive laptop Victor had provided from the Safe House stores. A brand new MacBook Pro. She ran her fingers over the aluminum chassis with a kind of reverence Reese found strangely moving. It was the look of an artist touching a Stradivarius after years of playing a cigar box fiddle. "If he's taken over your network, he'll be using your encryption protocols," Tessa said, her voice gaining strength, shifting into her professional register. "AES 256-bit. Standard stuff, but hard to crack brute force without a supercomputer." "So it's impossible?" Victor asked. Tessa looked at the big Russian and almost smiled. "Nothing is impossible. It just requires a different approach. I don't break the wall down. I find the crack in the foundation. Humans are always the weak point." She sat at the computer. Her posture changed. The hunched defensive stance of the street kid vanished, replaced by the upright intensity of a predator sitting before a terminal. "What's George's email? Not the work one. The private one. The one he uses for his mistress or his online gambling." Reese raised an eyebrow. "He uses a Proton Mail account for his sports betting." "Sleek Shark 88. Tessa's fingers became a blur on the keyboard. "Okay. Step 1. Fishing expedition. I'm sending him an email disguised as a high-priority alert from his bookie about a compromised account. He's arrogant, and he's celebrating tonight. He won't be careful. He clicks the link, I drop a payload onto his phone. A keylogger." Reese watched her work. He was used to violence that involved fists, guns, and intimidation. This was a different kind of warfare. Silent, invisible, and devastating. "You're good," Reese said quietly. "I was a semester away from a full ride to MIT when my mom got sick." Tessa said, eyes glued to the screen, the blue light reflecting on her face. "Medical bills ate everything. We lost the house. Then I lost her. The system breaks you if you don't have money to grease the gears. I learned to be the grease." It was the most she had spoken about herself. Reese felt a twinge of something unfamiliar respect, tinged with guilt, for the world. He perpetuated a world that created people like Tessa. An hour passed. The silence in the bunker was broken only by the frantic tapping of keys. Suddenly, Tessa stopped. She sat back, exhaling slowly. Got him. On the screen, a window popped up. It was a mirror of a smartphone screen. George's phone. They could see his text messages scrolling in real time. He's at the apex now, Tessa reported, scrolling through the messages. He's texting. Someone named Kale. Reese's blood ran cold. Kyle, the Albion Syndicate, London-based, heavy into human trafficking and high-end arms dealing. I refused to let them move product through my port 3 months ago. Looks like George made them a better offer, Tessa said. She opened an email attachment on George's phone. Here's the agreement. George gets 30% of all Albion shipments through Seattle in exchange for taking you out and opening the docks. Reese stood up. The pain in his side ignored. His eyes were hard pieces of flint. Victor, open the armory, Reese ordered. We know who, we know where. Now we end it. Victor nodded grimly and moved to a large steel locker against the far wall. Tessa looked up from the screen. You can't just walk into the apex. It's a fortress. He'll have 50 guys there tonight, celebrating his coronation. I'm not walking in, Reese said, watching Victor pull out assault rifles and ceramic body armor. I'm going to burn it down around him. The Apex Club in Belltown was a monument to new money and old vices. It was all polished concrete kinetic light sculptures and a bass line that thumped fast enough to induce tachycardia. On the VIP mezzanine, overlooking the writhing crowd below, George held court. He was younger than Reese by 5 years, sharper-featured, dressed in a suit that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. He lacked Reese's brooding intensity, replacing it with a frantic cocaine-fueled energy. He was a man who checked his stock portfolio while getting a blowjob. He raised a glass of champagne. To the future, he shouted over the music to the dozen captains and lieutenants gathered around him. Some looked celebratory. Others looked nervous. They all drank. The king is dead, George yelled, grinning fiercely. Long live the king! He felt invincible. The Albion deal was secure. Kyle had wired the first installment of $5 million an hour ago. Reese Russo was rotting in a gutter somewhere, a relic of a bygone era of honor and rules. George knew the only rule that mattered: eat or be eaten. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. Irritated, he pulled it out. It was his head of security, Jenkins, who was supposed to be downstairs manning the door. We have a problem. The police scanner is going nuts. Reports of shots fired at the Georgetown scrapyard an hour ago, and the fire department just got a call about a gas leak in our basement. George frowned. He started to type a reply. Handle the gas leak. What about Georgetown? Before he could hit send, his phone screen went black. Then a bright green skull icon appeared in the center. The music in the club abruptly cut out. The kinetic lights froze, plunging the club into near darkness, save for the eerie green glow emanating from hundreds of patrons' phones simultaneously. A voice boomed over the club's massive sound system. It wasn't the DJ. It was Reese Russo's voice. Calm, cold, amplified to godlike proportions. George? The name echoed through the stunned silence of the club. On the mezzanine, George dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the concrete floor. You tried to kill a king with a pawn's weapon, Reese's voice thundered. "You missed!" Downstairs, panic began to ripple through the crowd. The emergency exit lights flickered and died. The electronic locks on the main doors sealed shut with loud magnetic clunks. George ran to the railing, looking down. "Jenkins, get the doors open. What the fuck is going on with the system?" "We're locked out," Jenkins yelled from below, frantic. "Everything is frozen." Back in the bunker, Tessa sat at the MacBook, her face pale but determined. She was typing with one hand, the other gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. "I've isolated the club's building management system," she said to Reese, who was speaking into a microphone connected to the laptop. "Doors are sealed. Fire suppression system is disabled. Elevators are grounded." Reese leaned into the mic. "You wanted my city, George. You wanted my crown. You can have the ashes." Tessa hit the enter key. At the apex, the massive fire sprinkler system in the ceiling suddenly activated, but not with water. Tessa had hacked the building's theatrical effects system. The sprinklers began to spray a fine mist of accelerant fluid, the stuff used for the fire-breathing dancers on the main stage, over the entire crowd below. The smell of kerosene filled the air instantly. The panic turned into a stampede. People slipped on the slick floor, crushing against the locked doors. George watched in horror from the mezzanine. He turned to his men. "Kill the power. Find the breaker box." "There's no way out, George." Reese's voice boomed, sounding almost sad now. In the bunker, Reese looked at Tessa. "Light it up." Tessa hesitated for a fraction of a second. This wasn't fixing a toaster. This was mass murder. "Do it," Reese commanded softly. "They are soldiers in a war they chose to fight." Tessa closed her eyes and pressed a single key. At the club, the pyrotechnic sparklers mounted around the DJ booth, usually reserved for the beat drop, ignited simultaneously. The sparks hit the kerosene mist. The air itself seemed to catch fire. A massive whoosh of flame rolled across the dance floor, below a tidal wave of heat and orange light. The screams were instantaneous and horrific, drowned out only by the roar of the inferno. On the mezzanine, George was thrown back by the heat wave. He scrambled to his feet, coughing, his eyes watering from the smoke that billowed up. He looked at the exit door behind the VIP area. Locked. He was trapped in the hell he had created, listening to the voice of the ghost he had failed to bury. The silence in the bunker was heavier than the concrete walls surrounding them. On the laptop screen, the various feeds from inside the apex had all gone dead one by one, replaced by automatic or signal lost warnings as cameras melted and servers incinerated. The audio feed had cut out minutes ago, mercifully ending the chorus of screams. Tessa sat frozen, her hand still hovering over the keyboard. Her breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. The adrenaline that had fueled her hack was gone, replaced by a crushing, icy realization of what she had just done. She hadn't just pulled a trigger. She had weaponized an entire building. "Tessa." Reese's voice was low, cutting through the ringing in her ears. He wasn't looking at the screens. He was looking at her. She couldn't meet his eyes. She stared at her hands, the hands that repaired delicate watch mechanisms and salvaged circuit boards. They looked clean, but she felt a phantom warmth on them, like they were coated in the same kerosene that had soaked the club floor. I killed them," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Not just George. The waitstaff, the bartenders, the girls he had around him. They didn't all deserve that." "War doesn't care about deserve," Reese said, walking around the table. The pain in his side was a dull roar, now easily ignored compared to the storm brewing in the girl in front of him. He placed a hand on the back of her chair. They were in the enemy's camp when the bombs fell. That's all. Don't, she snapped, pulling away violently and standing up. The chair scraped loudly against the concrete. She spun to face him, her hazel eyes wide and swimming with tears she refused to let fall. Don't try to make it sound noble with Mafia poetry, Reese. I murdered 50 people for a man I met in an alley yesterday. She pressed the heels of her hands against her temples, pacing the small confines of the bunker. I was invisible. I lived in a cage, but I never hurt anyone. I fixed things. That was the rule. I fix things. And you fixed this, Reese said. He moved faster than a wounded man should, closing the distance and grabbing her wrists, pulling her hands away from her head. His grip was iron. Look at me. She forced herself to look up. His eyes were dark, bottomless pits that had seen decades of violence. But for the first time, she saw something else in them. Not just calculation. Not just rage. A fierce, terrifying possessiveness. You think you were invisible before, Reese murmured, his voice rough. You were just waiting to be seen. You have a mind that can level city blocks, Tessa. You were wasted on broken iPhones and Salvation Army radios. I'm a monster, she breathed. No, Reese corrected, pulling her slightly closer until she was pressed against his uninjured side. The scent of his expensive cologne mixed with the antiseptic smell of the bunker and the faint odor of her own fear. You're a weapon. My weapon. And tonight you fired the shot that saved my kingdom. He let go of one wrist and reached up his thumb, tracing the sharp line of her jaw, wiping away a smudge of grease she hadn't noticed. You saved my life in that alley, he said softly. Tonight you took souls to balance the ledger. That's the world. That's the price of admission. You're not in the cage anymore, Tessa. You're in the arena with me. Tessa trembled. She hated the logic. She hated that the horror was already beginning to recede, replaced by a dark, thrilling hum in her veins. He was right. She had spent years hiding, surviving on scraps, afraid of her own shadow. Tonight she had been a god of fire and vengeance. What happens now? She asked, her voice steadier. The heavy steel door of the bunker clanged open. Victor rushed in, his face pale, holding a portable radio crackling with police chatter. Dom, it's bad on the street. 5-alarm fire. They're saying it's the worst disaster in downtown since the 90s. The whole block is evacuated. Police feds, everyone is converging. Reese released Tessa slowly, his eyes lingering on hers before turning to his lieutenant. The mask of the ruthless Don was back in place. Let it burn, Reese said coldly. Victor, pack up the gear. We're leaving the bunker. This location is burned. Where are we going, boss? Home, Reese said. He looked back at Tessa. The real one. We need to get cleaned up. Tomorrow the city wakes up and realizes the king is back. And George? Victor asked. Reese looked at the blank screens. If he survived that, I'll kill him myself. But he didn't. The immediate threat is gone. He paused, his jaw tightening. But the people who bought him the Albion Syndicate, this Kyle in London, they just lost a massive investment. They won't take that lightly. He held out his hand to Tessa. It wasn't a demand this time. It was an invitation. The job just got harder, Reese said. Still want it. Tessa looked at his hand. It was the hand of a killer. A man who had dragged her into hell in less than 24 hours. She thought about her soul in the parking garage. The cold, the hunger, the constant fear of being found. She took his hand. "I still hate seeing things broken," she whispered. 3 days later, the rain had stopped, leaving Seattle scoured clean under a brittle blue sky. Reese Russo stood on the balcony of his penthouse atop the Escala Tower, 40 stories above the street. Below the charred skeleton of the Apex Club was a black smear in the Belltown skyline, surrounded by yellow crime scene tape and news vans. The official narrative was a tragic gas leak explosion, compounded by faulty pyrotechnics. The police commissioner, a man whose vacation home in Aspen was quietly financed by a Russo shell company, was ensuring the investigation remained focused. Reese took a sip of espresso. His side still ached, but the wound was closing cleanly. He was dressed in a fresh charcoal suit, immaculate, the master of all he surveyed. But the penthouse felt different. It was no longer just a bachelor pad of chrome and glass. It had become a command center. In the expansive living room, the Italian leather sofas had been pushed aside to make room for 3 massive curved monitors and a server rack that hummed with quiet power. Tessa sat at the center of it all. She was unrecognizable from the street kid in the M65 jacket. She wore dark, tailored trousers and a silk blouse that cost more than she used to make in a year of fixing stolen laptops. Her hair was clean, shining chestnut under the penthouse lights, cut into a sharp, modern bob that accentuated her cheekbones. But it was the eyes that remained the same hazel, intense, scanning streams of data that scrolled too fast for a normal person to read. "Talk to me," Reese said, walking in from the balcony, closing the glass door behind him, shutting out the city noise. Tessa didn't turn around. Her fingers flew across a mechanical keyboard. "We have confirmed fatalities on George and his entire top tier," she said, her voice cool, detached. The horror of the bunker seemed to have been compartmentalized, locked away behind a firewall in her mind. "The coroner's reports are messy. Identification is mostly dental records. Good. The vacuum is created. Now we fill it." "Already done," she said. "I've sent encrypted messages to the remaining capos. A mandatory sit-down tonight at the warehouse in Sodo. They know you're alive. They know what happened to George. They'll fall in line out of sheer terror." She spun her chair around. "But we have a bigger problem. I've been tracking the money trails from George's accounts. The 5 million from Albion. It didn't disappear when George died. It bounced back. Bounced back where? To a holding account in the Caymans. And 10 minutes ago, that account just purchased a majority stake in a shipping logistics firm on Harbor Island, one that operates right next to your main docks." Reese went still. He set his espresso cup down slowly on a glass table. "They aren't retreating," he said softly. "They're digging in." "Kyle," Tessa said, saying the name like a curse. "The head of the Albion syndicate. I did some digging on the dark web. He's not like the old-school mobsters. He's a ghost. No photos, no known address. He operates entirely through proxies and encrypted channels. He's a rumor that kills people." "Like you used to be," Reese said, a faint smirk touching his lips. Tessa stood up and walked toward him. The transition from street urchin to high-level operative was seamless, as if she had been born for this life. "Reese, he's not just trying to move in on your territory. He just bought a front door right next to yours. He's coming here." "Let him come," Reese said, his eyes hardening. "Seattle isn't London. He doesn't know the terrain." "He knows you're ruthless," Tessa countered. "He just watched you burn down a city block to kill a traitor. He won't underestimate you again." The elevator chime echoed in the massive penthouse, interrupting them. Reese reached for the Sig Sauer tucked into the waistband of his trousers beneath his suit jacket. Tessa stepped back toward her console, her hand hovering near a kill switch she had installed that would wipe all the drives instantly. Only Victor had the access code to the private elevator. The doors slid open smoothly. It wasn't Victor. Standing in the elevator car was a man in his late 30s, dressed in a suit that made Reese's Italian tailoring look off the rack. He was pale, with almost colorless blonde hair and eyes that were a startling icy blue. He held a slim leather briefcase. He stepped out into the penthouse, unarmed, unfazed by the gun Reese was pointing at his chest. He looked around the opulent room, his gaze resting briefly on the high-tech setup in the corner, and then on Tessa. He smiled a thin, mirthless curving of lips. "Mr. Russo," the man said, his voice a smooth, clipped British baritone. "An impressive view, and an even more impressive recovery. The rumors of your demise were thankfully exaggerated." "Who are you?" Reese demanded, flicking the safety off the cig. "How did you get past my security? Your security is excellent against brutes with guns," the man said, calmly, setting his briefcase on the glass table next to Reese's espresso. "Less so against someone who owns the company that installed your elevator software." He looked past Reese to Tessa. "And you must be the anomaly, the ghost in the machine that turned my investment in George into a barbecue." He nodded slightly, a gesture of genuine respect. "Brilliant work with the theatrical accelerants. Crude, but undeniably effective." Tessa stared at him. "You're Kyle." "I am," he said. He looked back at Reese. "You can put the gun away, Reese. If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have come up in an elevator." Reese didn't lower the weapon. "You backed a rat against me. You funded a coup." "I tested the market," Cale corrected. "George was ambitious but sloppy. He was a stress test for your organization. If you had let him kill you, you didn't deserve to hold this territory. But you didn't just survive. You annihilated the threat with a level of brutality that speaks to me." Kyle opened the briefcase. Inside wasn't a bomb or a weapon. It was a single, thick manila folder. "George was a middleman. I dislike middlemen. They are inefficient." Kyle slid the folder across the table. "My organization requires a reliable partner on the West Coast. Someone who understands that the old rules don't apply anymore. Someone who uses force when a knife won't do." Reese lowered the gun slightly, his curiosity warring with his fury. "You're offering a partnership after I just cost you millions." "Pocket change," Kyle dismissed. "The shipping routes you control are worth billions over the next decade. I want to move specialized product, through your port without interference. In exchange, you get access to Albion's global network, weapons intelligence laundering facilities in Dubai and Singapore that make your current setup look like a lemonade stand." Kyle's icy eyes shifted back to Tessa. "And I assume your brilliant new CTO comes as part of the package. We have some encryption hurdles in Eastern Europe that she might find stimulating." Reese looked at the folder, then at Kyle, and finally turned his head to look at Tessa. She was standing by her monitors, the queen of her domain, bathed in the blue light of data streams. She wasn't the homeless girl anymore. She was the architecture of his new power. He remembered her words in the alley. "I can fix it." She had fixed the gun. She had fixed his wounds. She had fixed the George problem. But looking at her now hard and brilliant and dangerous, he realized she hadn't just fixed things back to the way they were. She had upgraded them. She had upgraded him. Reese holstered his gun. He picked up the folder. "Tessa," Reese said, never taking his eyes off the British crime lord. "Pull up the schematics for the Harbour Island facility he just bought. Let's see what our new partner brings to the table. Tessa's fingers hit the keyboard. A complex blueprint filled the center screen. Reese smiled a wolfish grin that matched the new, darker world he had just stepped into. Welcome to Seattle, Kyle. Try not to break anything. My associate here hates having to fix things twice. Reese Russo got his kingdom back, but the price was fire and blood. And Tessa. The girl who just wanted to fix broken things realized that some things like Reese and like her own soul couldn't be fixed. They could only be remade into something harder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. They saved each other, but in doing so, they doomed themselves to a world where the only safety is having the biggest gun and the smartest hacker. If you enjoyed this gritty Mafia thriller with a tech twist smash that, like Button It, really helps the channel out, what did you think of Tessa's transformation? Did she go too far at the club? Let me know your theories down in the comments, and if you want more stories about power, betrayal, and the dark corners of the city, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching.